Hi, I am sat here this evening with my dogs and my lit fire, and as it's a cosy night I'm going to be reading you a story. So my good friend Salvador from Australia, who happened to purchase this beautiful silk blouse and this satin skirt for me, sent me this story that he wrote himself, and this evening I'm going to read it for you. So get yourself a cup of hot chocolate, sit back and relax and enjoy the story. It's called From Above with a Flash. Chapter 1, Arrival. On a beautiful autumn night with the stars shining, whilst relaxing on my porch chair drinking whiskey, it began with a white flash in the sky. I dropped my whiskey glass, smashing it into a million pieces on the porch, and I stood up gazing at the sky. The white flash happened over and over again, and as it was doing so, I walked on the lawn to watch it in 360-degree view. The whole sky from north, east, south and west was flashing this bright white that turned the night into day. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and thought to myself that I must have drunken too much whiskey. Then I thought, was the stars themselves falling from the heavens? White objects in their hundreds fell to earth all around from small town of Songgy. It was called Songgy because of the woman called Elizabeth Terre created the town 300 years ago, and she brought people together through song. We then added the Y to song to make it sound French, so we say it like a songy. One by one, these white things from the heavens fell to earth, and I was filled with fear for them. But I loved my town of Songgy and the people that lived here, and the good people, and I didn't want any evil to come to them. So I went inside and went to get my gun. And I went to my gun room and I picked out a few rifles and shotguns and grabbed all the ammo I could. I also grabbed my hunting knife and put it inside my jacket pocket. I then put them all in the back of my pickup truck and went back inside to grab the bottle of whiskey to keep up my courage. By the time that I started to drive off to Songgy, the white things stopped falling. Chapter 2. The white things. What are they? I hear you ask. Well, keep listening and you'll find out. As I was driving to Songgy, I heard on the radio reports of people being in absolute fear and despair from the white flashes and the falling of the white things. Some people reported the white things landing in their yards, and one person reported that one crashed into their house and set the house on fire. Then the emergency broadcast took over the radio, ensuring people not to panic and to stay indoors and to wait for further instructions from authorities. The closer I got into the heart of Songgy, the more cars I passed leaving the town, many of them urging me to do the same. But like I said, I would not let no evil come to this town, so I drove on. I stopped my truck in the heart of Songgy and found myself surrounded by the white things. I also found some other men and a few women that had the same idea as me, to stay and fight just in case the situation turned ill. Just then the sun rose and the things shone in the day like diamonds. Hours passed and these things showed no signs of movement. That was until the sun rose high in the sky at 12 and the things started to spin. They did this for several minutes until the coverings dislodged in a fast motion, cutting some people in half and fatally wounding others. Oh no. I was lucky to be in my truck at the time because it protected me. Then their true forms were seen for the first time, and it's kind of hard to describe, so I'll do the best I can. They are like a plant that is walking around with bright red and green leaves, had machine parts to operate it, and there was a hole in the centre. The rest that saw the deaths of the others started to open fire on these things from the heavens, and thus the fight for our lives began. I thought this was going to be a pleasant, nice little story. It's turning into a bit of a horror. My goodness. I think I need a glass of wine. Oh, look, I got some. Need the whiskey though by the sounds of it. Chapter 3, the deadly hum. Ooh. The initial firefight killed over a dozen of them until I saw them communicate with each other through hand signals or whatever those body parts were, and they changed forms. So instead of being more plant than machine, they become more machine than plant and protected themselves against the bullets by creating an outer shell, which gave me two very important details about them. One, that they are highly intelligent, and two, that the plant part of them is the weak point. With this knowledge about the weak points, I had to tell the others about it, but I simply couldn't shout it out because the monsters could hear me. So I had to communicate with the others silently. And without monsters knowing what I knew. The person that is nearest to me was about 50 metres away, so I slipped out of my truck and ran to him. It was at this point that those monsters started to fight back, and fight back in an interesting fashion, I must say. Their arms twisted around each other in a coil and tightened into a spring. One of them released the spring coil. It quickly uncoiled away from their bodies, shooting yards of steel in a 180-degree direction in front of them, making a loud humming noise. These shards of steel were propelled at such speed that they went through anything in their path. This type of attack both fascinated me and terrified me at the same time. I just managed to dodge this first attack, but one of the shards just passed my left ear, and that weird humming noise made my ear bleed. I'm guessing that's that's because of the force it was going, made it vibrated and hum like when you are hitting a tuning fork. I evaded this attack several times to get the word out about the weak link in their system. Everyone that got this information killed dozens of these monsters from space. One by one, these monsters fell dead in a puddle of foliage and melted still, for it turned out that the steel keeping its shape and size depended on them being alive. Then we found out that the hole in the centre of them did. Oh my goodness, what did the hole in the centre of them do? We're going to find out. Chapter 4, Within. You're all on the edge of your seats. I was going to say I am, but you can see I'm not, but you know what I mean. Anyway, Chapter 4, Within. Over several hours of fighting these creatures, some of the Songiter people that fled in terror returned to join the fight. Woohoo! Which was a good thing as well, because our numbers were decreasing, which made us greatly outnumbered. These creatures after some time, started to build barriers between us and them with parts of themselves. They would take off some metal panels from their bodies and somehow increase the mass of the panel to form a wall. That's cheating. Then created a slot to shoot through. It's a bit clever though. This gave them both an advantage and a disadvantage at the same time. It gave them an advantage because our bullets just ricocheted off of them, but it gave them a disadvantage because the panels that they took from their bodies did not get replaced. That's what we thought at the time, thus leaving holes and making them vulnerable to attack. So with this vulnerability, we came up with a plan to make as many of these walls as we can. So with them making all these walls, we would send a secret group of people and attack them from behind the walls. Doing this at the time made us think it would give us more of a fighting chance if they were all weaker and more killable, and in a more killable state. To surprise attack would work. We continued to fight till it was dark to give them more time to build walls, and so we could use the cover of darkness. At that time, we were unsure if these creatures could see in the dark or not. A group of fighters broke off the main group, including me, and made its way to flank the enemy from behind. Since all of us knew the town like the back of our hands, so knew the terrain and building well, we did this without lights. As we were getting into the flanking position, I occasionally looked behind us at the rest of the fighters, catching glimpses of fighters dying in bits and pieces from the humming shards. Ew. This only increased my resolve to march on and kill every single one of these nightmarish creatures. We got into flanking position and waited for the moment to strike. I remember as I was checking that my guns were loaded, that my hands were shaking, so I reached into my jacket and pulled out my whiskey and took a deep drink. Good idea. It calmed my nerves a bit. Oh, not quite enough. That's better. It calmed my nerves a bit, and I passed it on to the others in the group. It was time, and we set out towards the waiting creatures who knew not what was coming. Ha ha! We got to a distance of about 5 meters from behind them without detection, and raised our guns to fire. It was then that we found out that the holes in what their centres did. We were about to fire and kill them, all but someone stood on a twig making a noise, and the creatures turned around. Why is there always a twig on the ground? It happens in the movies all the time, doesn't it? Somebody stands on something and makes a noise, ruins it all for everybody. The person that made the noise was grabbed by the closest creature to him, and he was pulled into the hole. Into the hole? Ooh. This creature from another world was eating and consuming the man whole. Ew. Even his clothes and equipment was eaten. 2 sounds made this sickening. 1, the sounds of the man screaming in pain. 2, when the scream stopped, the sound of his bones crunching. I don't know if I want to read anymore. Ugh. We all stood back in absolute terror for what we were watching, but still couldn't look away. Morbid curiosity, see? Once the man was fully consumed, the creature regrew the metal panels that it was missing and grew in mass as well. When it was finished, this shocking and horrific process, the final battle for Songgy Ter began. Ew. Chapter 5. It's a good job I've not just eaten my dinner. Far Q. Sorry. Anyway. Chapter 5. Far Q. We then all snapped out of the shock and horror feeling we were in and started firing at the creatures and took some cover. From that moment on, we all made sure to keep our distance from these creatures so they couldn't have an all-you-could-eat human buffet. The creatures were surrounded and we started to win and outnumber them. Victory was at hand, and because of that, I got careless and did something really stupid. Oh no. I wanted to see one of these things up close and tried to talk to one. Why? Why would you do that? I got up close to one and shot his arms, thinking that it would make it safe for me, and started to ask what it wanted. Before I knew it, the creature grew extra arms and grabbed me. It pulled me in quick, and I was inside the belly. I was inside the belly of this thing and being eaten alive. So I quickly took my hunting knife out of my jacket and started to stab and cut at everything I could reach. The more I cut and stabbed, the less grip this thing had on me. I then must have cut a vital organ or something because the thing started to melt around me. Then I was in a pile of this creature's dead fluid and melted metal, and I was drowning in it. The stuff flooded my mouth. And then a new fight began, the fight for breath. Someone close to me pulled me out, and I finally getting the room to eject the stuff out of my system, I began to vomit it up. The whole ordeal lasted just a few minutes, but it felt like hours. When I vomited the last bunch of stuff from my stomach, I was left with some deep cuts and a bad taste of foliage and rusted metal. Once I got to my feet and shook off the, oh crap, I was going to get eaten, shock and all I was going through, I rejoined the fight. The creatures were down to a dozen and were fighting and were firing at us in more erratic fashion instead of precision that they have been doing up until this point. I think for them, the realization that they were going to lose was starting to kick in, so they were panicking. Then they did something that they didn't do before. They recoiled their arms and shot straight. The result to this new form of attack sent the shards of metal raining down upon us. The rain of metal killed some of us, and this made our numbers on more of an equilibrium level. One of the people that got killed didn't see it coming and got sliced in half from head down. I myself was damaged in the attack, with one of the shards hitting my back, leaving a massive cut that went from my shoulder to halfway down my back. The pain from this made lifting my gun hard to do, so I played more of a covering fire role than a straightforward attack like I was doing until this point. We were then down to the last few creatures to kill, so we surrounded them from all directions, leaving no room to escape us. With them being cornered, they pulled off a new trick, and the last three emerged into one huge creature. Then we all looked at each other with a look of, we won't survive this. This massive new creature was 3 stories high and looking at us all. It then coiled its body into a tight column and did something we didn't expect. We all took cover and ran away as fast as we could and heard an explosion behind us. Huge amounts of metal shards and foliage went over our heads. At the moment it stopped, we stood up and looked behind us. The creature that was massive was gone and couldn't be seen from where we were standing. It was discovered that the creature had self-terminated itself in a last ditch to kill us all. The threat of those strange creatures from space was over, and Songgy Ter then began to repair and clean up the mess. I helped as much as I could, but was so tired from the battle I went home. I was back at the point I was at the start of this tale, with some whiskey sitting on my front porch. I then, from pure exhaustion, started to fall into a restless sleep until from under my eyelids I made out a flash, opened my eyes and saw the sky flashing white. At this moment I gave the sky the middle finger and said, F you. The end. My goodness. It's a bit dramatic. Don't know if I'm going to sleep tonight now. My goodness. So there we are. I told you to get a cup of hot cocoa and sit back and relax and hear this story. But as I'm sure you gathered from this, it was not a relaxing story at all. A nice little bedtime tale. It was actually quite horrific and quite gory and scary in some parts. So I hope you don't have nightmares. and I hope you enjoyed the story. It'll save you watching a horror on the television. So well done, Salvador, for your story. I enjoyed reading it, and thank you for the blouse and the skirt. I hope you like the look of them. Cheers.